The crisp Montana air carried hints of pine and nostalgia as Eliza Tanner stared at the faded photograph of her mother. Those familiar eyes, her eyes, gazed back from the image, a silent reminder of all the questions that remained unanswered. At 22, Eliza had built a life for herself in Millhaven, but the mystery of her father's identity lingered like a shadow over every milestone. "Your father had your exact eyes," her mother had once told her, "and that same little birthmark on your shoulder." These fragments of information, along with mentions of a brief, alcohol-fueled encounter at a summer party, were all Eliza had to go on. Her mother had passed away when Eliza was only 9, leaving these breadcrumbs of identity that led nowhere. The small general store where Eliza worked was quiet that Tuesday afternoon. She arranged a display of local honey jars, her mind drifting as it often did to those unanswered questions. Her grandmother had done her best raising Eliza on their small farm outside Millhaven until they moved into town when Eliza was 14. Her grandmother had wanted a less physically demanding life, and Millhaven offered both simplicity and opportunity. "Excuse me, is this locally sourced?" The deep voice startled Eliza from her reverie. She turned to find a tall man with salt and pepper hair holding up one of the honey jars. There was something immediately magnetic about him, a quiet confidence that filled the space between them. "Yes, it's from the Brewster farm just outside town," she replied, noticing how his eyes crinkled when he smiled. "I'm Hank Westfield, the new manager," he said, extending his hand. "First day on the job." Eliza felt an unexpected flutter in her chest as they shook hands. "Eliza Tanner. I've been working here for 5 years now." Over the following weeks, Hank became a steady presence in Eliza's life. At 49, he was 32 years her senior, but age seemed irrelevant in the face of their growing connection. He listened to her dreams of someday opening her own flower shop and shared stories of his travels across the country before settling in Millhaven for what he called a simpler life. "You remind me of someone," he said one evening as they closed the store together. "Something about your eyes." Eliza had heard this before, but coming from Hank, it felt different, like a piece of a puzzle shifting closer to place. Their relationship evolved naturally. Despite the whispers around town about their age difference, Hank met Eliza's grandmother, who surprised everyone by giving her immediate approval. "I see how he looks at you," her grandmother said. "That's the look of a man who's found his home." 3 months after moving in together in Hank's comfortable cabin on the outskirts of Millhaven, Eliza discovered she was pregnant. The news transformed their already strong bond into something even more precious. They married in a small ceremony by the lake, with her grandmother and a handful of friends as witnesses. Their son, Ethan, was born with developmental challenges that the doctors couldn't quite explain. It was difficult, but Hank's unwavering support gave Eliza strength. 4 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Lily, who also required special care. The challenges only seemed to deepen their commitment to each other. Life settled into a rhythm of therapies, schooling adaptations, and the everyday joys of watching their children grow. Eliza and Hank found strength in their partnership, facing each challenge together with a unified front that impressed everyone who knew them. In their small Millhaven community, they became known as the family that persevered through anything. It was during a routine trip to the grocery store that the first unsettling comment came. "Your father is so good with your children," an elderly woman remarked to Eliza while watching Hank patiently help Ethan choose a cereal box. "He's my husband," Eliza corrected with a polite smile, used to the misunderstanding that occasionally happened due to their age gap. The woman's eyes widened slightly. "Oh my, I'm sorry, dear. It's just that you look so much alike. Those same distinctive eyes and expressions. I assumed you were father and daughter." Eliza brushed it off, but the comment lingered. That evening, as she helped Lily with her physical therapy exercises, she found herself studying Hank's features more closely. The shape of his eyes, the curve of his smile, the way he tilted his head when concentrating, all eerily familiar in ways she hadn't fully registered before. More comments followed. At a school meeting, Ethan's teacher assumed Hank was Eliza's father. At the annual town festival, old-timers remarked on their family resemblance. Each observation added to a growing discomfort that Eliza couldn't quite name. One night, as Hank slept soundly beside her, Eliza slipped out of bed and retrieved her mother's old journals from a trunk in the attic. She had read them before, searching for clues about her biological father, but now she pored over them with new intensity. Her mother's descriptions were vague, but included telling details. Tall with distinctive blue-green eyes, a small birthmark on his shoulder blade, passing through town for a summer job, attending a 4th of July party where too much whiskey led to a night her mother never regretted, despite its brevity. He was headed west, her mother had written, said Montana called to him. The words hit Eliza with the force of revelation. Hank had mentioned working summer jobs in his youth, traveling extensively before finally settling down. He had that exact same birthmark on his shoulder blade. She had always found it endearing how it mirrored her own. And those eyes, their shared eyes, that everyone commented on. For days Eliza lived with her suspicion, observing Hank with their children, calculating dates and possibilities in her mind. The timeline fit. The physical similarities were undeniable. The coincidence of him ending up in Millhaven, at that store at that precise moment in her life, seemed less like chance and more like some cruel trick of fate. She began asking casual questions about his past, specifically about where he had been 23 years ago. His answers, though honest and open, only deepened her dread. Summer of 2001. I was doing construction work in this region, actually. Bounced between a few towns. Why do you ask? Eliza struggled to maintain her composure. Just curious about your life before me. That night, she found an old box of Hank's photographs, pictures of a younger man with the same eyes, standing in front of landmarks she recognized around the county. In one, he wore a t-shirt from a local brewery's 4th of July celebration, dated the very year of her conception. The evidence accumulated like snow on a Montana winter morning, silent, ominous, and impossible to ignore. Eliza found herself watching Ethan and Lily with new eyes, analyzing their developmental challenges with a sickening hypothesis forming in her mind. During a follow-up appointment with the children's specialist, she carefully broached the subject. Dr. Bennett, could their conditions possibly be related to genetic factors? Specifically if the parents were closely related without knowing it? The doctor's professional demeanor didn't waver, but his eyes registered concern. It's one possibility among many. Consanguinity can increase risks for certain conditions. May I ask why you're inquiring about this specifically? Eliza couldn't bring herself to explain. Just exploring all possibilities, she murmured. That evening, after tucking the children into bed, Eliza sat Hank down in their living room. Outside, a gentle snow began to fall, insulating their cabin in a deceptive tranquility that belied the storm brewing within. Hank, I need to ask you something that might sound strange, she began, her voice trembling despite her efforts to remain calm. Did you ever know a woman named Caroline Tanner, 23 years ago, at a 4th of July party? Hank's brow furrowed in concentration. Caroline Tanner, the name sounds vaguely familiar, but I can't place it. 23 years is a long time, honey. She was my mother, Eliza pressed on, watching his face closely. She described my father as having eyes just like mine, a birthmark on his left shoulder blade. She said they met at a brewery party, that he was passing through town for summer work. Understanding dawned slowly across Hank's features, followed by disbelief, then horror. Eliza, you can't possibly think, show me your shoulder, she whispered. With reluctance, Hank turned and lifted his shirt. There it was, the distinctive mark that mirrored her own, positioned in exactly the same spot. The silence that followed was deafening. When Hank finally spoke, his voice was hollow. This is impossible. I would have known. Somehow I would have felt it. Would you? Eliza asked, tears streaming down her face. We've been strangers until 5 years ago. You never knew she had a daughter. The timing matches perfectly. You were here that summer at that party. Everyone comments on how much we look alike. The implications crashed down around them. Their beautiful life together, their children, their love, all of it suddenly cast in a horrifying new light. We need to know for certain, Hank finally said, his voice cracking. A DNA test. The following days passed in a fog of forced normalcy. They maintained routines for the children's sake, but the space between them had become an abyss of uncertainty. Eliza found herself analyzing every interaction, every family photograph, wondering how she had missed the signs for so long. The DNA results arrived via email on a Tuesday afternoon while Hank was at work. Eliza stared at her phone for 20 minutes before finding the courage to open the message. The clinical language did nothing to soften the blow. 99.9998% probability of a parent-child relationship. When Hank returned home, one look at her face told him everything. He sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "What have we done?" he whispered. Eliza's grandmother was the first person they told. The elderly woman sat in stunned silence as they explained, her weathered hands clasped tightly in her lap. When they finished, she surprised them both. "You found each other without knowing," she said slowly. "There was no way you could have known. The love you've built, the family you've created, none of that was wrong. But the children," Eliza said, her voice breaking, "their conditions. They need both their parents," her grandmother insisted. "They need stability and love, which you've always given them." Hank nodded, clutching Eliza's hand. "I agree, we didn't do anything wrong, not knowingly. Our feelings developed naturally. They're real." But despite their attempts to rationalize the situation, an invisible barrier had formed between them. Eliza found herself flinching at Hank's touch, her mind recontextualizing their entire relationship through this new, disturbing lens. Nights became an exercise in careful distance, days a performance of normalcy for the children's benefit. "We can make this work," Hank insisted one evening, 2 weeks after the confirmation. "People have overcome worse." "Our circumstances are extraordinary." Eliza wanted to believe him. She tried for 8 agonizing weeks to reconcile her feelings with their reality. She still loved Hank, that hadn't changed, but everything else had. The children sensed the tension. Ethan became withdrawn, his progress in therapy stalling. Lily's night terrors returned with increasing frequency. Their fragile equilibrium was disintegrating. On a clear September morning, Eliza made her decision. She waited until the children were at their therapy session with a trusted provider. "I can't do this anymore," she told Hank, her heart breaking with each word. "Not the way we were before. It's destroying me, and the children can feel it." "We can get counseling," Hank pleaded, his eyes, their shared eyes, filled with desperation. "Move somewhere new, start fresh where no one knows us." "And live a lie? Always looking over our shoulders?" Eliza shook her head. "The truth would follow us, and I can't pretend this knowledge doesn't change things." The separation was arranged with as much care as possible. Hank moved into a small apartment in town, close enough to maintain his relationship with the children. Eliza kept the cabin, preserving their familiar environment. They told the children that Daddy needed to be closer to work, a half-truth that provided temporary comfort. The effects were immediate and devastating. Ethan stopped speaking entirely for 2 weeks after Hank moved out. Lily's progress regressed significantly. Hank maintained his scheduled visits, but the children sensed the fundamental change in their family structure. 3 months into the separation, during one of Hank's weekend visits with the children, Eliza watched from the porch as he patiently helped Lily practice her walking exercises in the yard. Ethan sat nearby, actually smiling for the first time in weeks as Hank made silly faces to encourage his sister. That night, after the children were asleep and Hank had returned to his apartment, Eliza sat alone at her kitchen table, surrounded by family photographs. The impossible choice confronted her with merciless clarity: continue a separation that was slowly devastating their children, or rebuild a relationship forever altered by an unimaginable truth. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. "Sometimes the greatest courage is in accepting what others would condemn, when you know in your heart it's right." The next morning, Eliza drove to Hank's apartment. He opened the door, surprise evident on his face. Their exchanges had been carefully scheduled and limited since the separation. "The children need us both," she said simply. "And I need to find a way forward that doesn't destroy what we've built." "What are you saying?" Hank asked, hope cautiously dawning in his expression. "I'm saying I don't have the answers yet," Eliza replied honestly. "But I want to find them together. If you were moved by Eliza and Hank's journey, don't forget to show us. A like on this video means so much and helps us continue bringing stories that make you think and feel. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming narratives that explore the complex labyrinths of the human heart. We're curious. What would you do in Eliza's place? Was her decision the right one? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's continue this conversation. Tomorrow we have another story that will touch your heart in unexpected ways.